So let's call to order the meeting of the Sandpoint Arts Commission. It's a special meeting for July 17th, 2020. I'd like to do a roll call, and we can use this time to just give quick introductions. I'm Ellie Susness, Chair of the Commission.
I'm Holly Walker.
Can you guys speak up a little bit?
Yes.
Thanks.
I'm Holly Walker.
Carol Kowalczyk, Vice Chair, Arts Commission.
I'm Steve Garvin, the head of the historic preservation, but also involved in the arts. So I'd like to come to you guys' meetings, especially this week since we've been working with the Lakota people.
I'm Hannah Combs.
Eric Walls, the City of Sandpoint.
And I'd like to introduce the Lakota group and their associate, Raleigh Phillips. And this is Nick. I'll let you
It's Carol DeRuises. And I'm an associate principal with the Lakota group. And it's a pleasure to be here. I have two other people with me, and you may have met them already. So they're at the farmers market. So it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thanks. And I'm Sorrel Phillips. I'm an affiliate with the Lakota Group. I'm not a partner with the firm, but we work together often. And I'm a specialist in arts and culture planning. So the way this meeting is going to work today, we have a very short 55 minutes with a hard fast at 5 minutes to 5, which is definitely not enough time to get all the input from the Arts Commission that we could want. So what we plan to do is circulate some questions to you, your commission, and the Historic Preservation Commission and the steering committee for this project after we leave town tomorrow, and gather some feedback that way, and then bring you all together at some points down the road, probably via Zoom, or whatever the future holds for that kind of meeting.
Patricia Walker just arrived.
Sorry, I'm late.
Hi, I'm Sorrel Phillips,
And I'm Nick Carol DeRuises.
and we're with the Lakota Group. So today, I think we're going to keep it really simple with one core question and two follow-ups to that question. And what we'd like to hear from the Arts Commission today is, what are your top 3 to 5 priorities for this plan? So when you think about Sandpoint 5-10 years from now, how might it be better or different as a result of this plan being in place? And let me just tell you, the follow-up questions to that will be, who's going to lead this effort? How do we get there? So we'd just like to hear your thoughts.
Anybody else to start?
Would you like me to start calling on people?
Well, I'll bring up something that I brought up this morning, is the fact that the Art Commission, the funding that we have access to is Sandpoint Urban Renewal Funds, and that will sunset in 2029. So funding is definitely something that we will have to address at a certain point.
Okay.
Sooner than later, I would say. And that's my first thought.
I think that's a primary one for me too, and some cities that have a continuation plan out of building fees or different things, or maybe some other ways that smaller towns like ours have found a way to keep the arts, especially the public arts, because the Idaho Commission of the Arts doesn't have that funding mechanism going anymore right now either. So something that continues that.
Okay. So funding options.
Funding options, exactly.
Anyone else?
I think one of the biggest challenges as real estate prices get much higher in the area would be identifying and securing spaces that would be reserved for the arts, whether that's murals or spaces for performances, spaces for art exhibits. I think space is really one of the biggest commodities that we're going to be in need of in the next 5 to 10 years.
So does that include spaces for making also, so spaces for art makers.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree for the art makers because things are so expensive that you almost can't afford to buy something that also has a studio in it, so it'd be nice to have studio space for artists. I know a lot of cities they use old schools or they use old buildings and they refurbish them for art studios.
So we have funding and space.
Another one for me is the marrying of the history and the art in future building. You know, the mayor had an ad hoc committee that explored some of those city codes, but how to marry honoring historical buildings, honoring the arts. And I know in some of the larger cities, there's an actual percentage of your building, you have to have an artistic element to your building. Would be
Yep.
nice to see
A
that.
percent for art program.
Not so much for the
Not for
program,
public.
but for the artistic appeal of the building itself. So. In concept and design.
Okay.
Of course, that's put it back in the city to be reviewing that, but. I'm sorry, I was so
What about,
focused on the
anything related to this plan that impacts your public art plan?
In terms of, maybe mapping out where, we've started working on an inventory of where artwork is and where future artwork may go. What are the, criteria, or what are some map locations that we can strategically plan with regards to funding and partnerships? That's something we've started to work on, looking at, based on different criteria like nodes or, pathways,
Gateways.
gateway features.
We started to plan at some point to identify those.
Okay. So as part of our community engagement with the community at large, we can focus in on asking members of the community to identify places of meaning for them that might warrant exploration for public art in the future.
Great idea.
Okay. Any other priorities?
Some protection of the art that exists as well. Does that just come up?
What do you mean by protection?
Like older artistic elements that might have some type of maintenance protection.
Okay.
I mean, what just happened to us was on a fluke, that's more current, but there are some older artistic pieces in town that would have the potential to be vandalized and, have a plan in place.
Well, even just a regular maintenance schedule
Yeah.
is something that we've been working towards with the development of that inventory. My thought was, if we have a list of pieces, then we can go to the artist, get the best practices for cleaning, maintenance, repair, have that in place. We don't, we just started that process, so that's something that we really like to have a priority on.
Right, so this is actually a broader arts and culture and historic preservation plan, so not to add a plan to another plan, but it may result in a recommendation to update your public art plan, so you go through that formal process with that particular plan. For policies and guidelines around maintenance and conservation and all of that good stuff.
Did you have any recommendations on the cultural side of this plan?
Do I have any
Arts, culture, and history.
Do I have recommendations? Not
Any-
yet.
Any observances that, I know you got to see a few things.
Yeah, so I just can tell you what we've been learning in the past 48 hours. So, 48 hours is not a lot of time. And we haven't reached out to the community at large yet. But we're hearing a lot about opportunities for collaboration. Sort of there's the strength of bringing partners to the table for funding. There's issues of accessibility that we're hearing. There's a lot of pride of place and an interest in finding some common threads or common themes that people as a community, we are all Sandpoint can rally around as far as arts and culture goes and cultural expression. So that's what we're hearing. They're not exactly recommendations, but those are themes that we're hearing. Did that answer your question?
It did.
Okay. All right, so that's probably like 4 specific things: funding, space, marrying history and the arts, inventorying assets and identifying future opportunities for public art, and protecting that public art, possibly updating a public art plan. So who leads these efforts?
That was going to be one of my comments, is when we have established a great plan for what we want to do moving forward, how do we ensure that that is implemented? And how do we prioritize these plans if we don't have city staff dedicated to arts and culture? Because right now, our liaisons are also have another full-time job doing other things for the city. So how do we really prioritize these efforts without that staffing established in the city?
Well, through partnerships and possibly contracted services, but you're not going to have a goal in your plan that doesn't have an identified leader and funding source. So, you know, if we can pie in the sky plan for all of these wonderful things, but unless there's an infrastructure and there's some sense of who's going to take ownership of the ideas, it's not going to be in the plan.
So often, cities have an arts and culture, staff person, that would require, and that would help a leader outside of the Arts Commission, but right now, I think it's the Arts Commission all the organizations in town that handle the arts all do so individually, but try to coordinate, and then the Arts Commission reaches out to make sure there's people from all those different areas on the commission as much as possible.
However, we are volunteers,
We are all volunteers, right?
so there's the
I'm
elements of
paid.
that. So that's why we count on Aaron to fit it into his schedule.
There was mention made this morning by Jennifer of a possible future funded position, but it sounded like it would cover 4 or 5 bases. It wouldn't just be arts and culture, so I don't know. And it might not be, I don't know if that would be a leader person for those if they were having to cover that much base, but she just mentioned it as a future possibility, right?
Yeah, I've actually mentioned to her that there might be state funding for a position, partially through, I know Commission on the Arts. And I think, as you remember, Megan, we have an arts commissioner that is now the executive director for arts within the city of Moscow.
Okay.
And I think her position is partially funded through the Idaho Commission on the Arts through that grant program.
I was gonna mention Megan, she was a great success story. She's a working artist as well as she was on the commission for 2 years. And the city of Moscow has a position called art director who handles all their collections. And there's, I think, a gallery as well that she handles. So ideally, that position would be something that I would be in favor of. Someone who would be directly responsible for those kind of things.
So I think one of the challenges too is as far as what to prioritize. We talked about, identifying locations for public art, but, having a plan that prioritizes projects over time would really help us maximize efficiency, regardless of whether we have additional staff or not. That helps us maximize our efficiency and know what to do when. Because a lot of times, we get started on something and then, we come up with another great idea, and it's not always clear for us what projects to prioritize. So
And that's not just staff, that's us as a commission also. We bring these ideas and, have the go ahead to, go move forward and then find out that it's not something that we can, complete. And so I don't like to have my time wasted either. And I certainly don't want staff to waste their time because it's too precious, so.
So because this isn't specifically a public art plan, would it be helpful to the commission if we were to propose some short-term, midterm, and long-term strategies for addressing the issue of public art and creative placemaking? Okay.
Yeah, because the two towns I know of that have a designated arts coordinator also have they also have city-owned buildings where performances and galleries and that, they are city buildings that they are also a part of. A little bit different for here because.
Yeah.
none of
So
the
if
city
a dedicated staff person at the city is not feasible, where does that leadership for implementation come from in this community? Where do you think?
Volunteers?
All volunteers?
Yeah.
Well, I think something that I've thought about a lot is that it seems because of the limited, staff assistance we have here and the fact that all of the arts commissioners are volunteers, the scope of what we do is really limited to public art, which means that all of the other
Right.
aspects of the arts are being managed by local nonprofits who do a great job. But I wonder, is there more that the city or the Arts Commission can do to advocate for those other types of arts in the community to create a more cohesive identity amongst all of these organizations?
Well, I also know we talked about how some cities partner with the local arts council and make that, I'm not sure how that works. I've not really explored that, but I know in Spokane they do it and in Coeur d'Alene they do it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's obviously doable. So
Yeah.
that could be another avenue.
Okay. And that would be POAC.
Right.
Any other thoughts on your end for how we get there? I mean, we can make recommendations to you as consultants, but we don't live and work in Sandpoint. We don't know how things get done here. Every community is different.
How we get there.
I mean, it depends on the project. We're pretty project or event specific in that regard. If it's something that falls within, POAC's thing or the museum's thing or the Canada's thing, I mean, it just kind of depends on what it is, who leads that force. So it requires collaboration at this point. It doesn't have a specific leader outside of the Arts Commission.
I think without clear communication, we sometimes find ourselves duplicating efforts.
Yes, absolutely.
So
I
there's
think-
no one sort of coordinating, serving as a hub and facilitator of all of it.
And I've also heard that, from all of these organizations, we're all critically understaffed
Yes.
for what we're trying to do. And we are providing excellent products for the community to enjoy, but at the expense of often overworking our staffs and not having that communication to connect us and make it easier for all of us. Okay.
That seems to be true for a lot of nonprofits throughout town. We went through, another part of my job was to go through the administer the High Five grant. And through that process, same story, we had a lot of people, a lot of groups and individuals doing all these different things to support the health of youth. And through that effort, there was a lot of collaboration that evolved from it. I wouldn't say it's, a central agency didn't really evolve and kind of package one, but that's just a common theme, I would say, for the cities. We have a lot of groups, individuals doing wonderful things, but independent of one another, you know, and so there is probably, I know there was an opportunity there that we saw, and there's probably, what I'm hearing, I think, is a real opportunity for arts and culture to be more collaboration and partnerships, whether it involves the city or not.
Right.
But there's opportunity, probably there is. I think what I'm hearing.
Well, and the thing is, even 10 years ago at the Arts Alliance, we were talking about this and, you know, trying to get everybody under some kind of grouping, you know, and it just, you know, people want to collaborate, yet they are resistant. They, you know, hold what assets they have tight. And so I think that's the thing that we need to solve, is how to open everybody up to really do the work and do the collaboration and not be, I don't want to be negative, but just be more open to the fact that it would help.
So maybe that is where a plan can help you, because you'll have some common goals as opposed to being project driven. You'll have more strategies for the development of your arts and culture sector and ecology that you can all contribute to.
One huge asset to Sandpoint is that there's a respect for the arts. The downside of that, though, that I see is we don't always respect that artists should be paid. So we love the arts, but we don't pay artists consistently. So,
And, you know, we try and do that
Right.
as a group.
As a group,
ourselves,
so
but- and try and
yeah,
educate, but, you know, like she says, it's
especially in the
always happening.
performance art side of it, you hear a lot of people ask to pay for free, you know, you come do this for free all the time. And so there's a little bit of a disconnect in there that we really have a respect for the arts up here.
Okay, so there's an education component to that. Yeah, being an artist is a vocation.
Yes.
Okay. Any other thoughts?
There's not a common calendar for the arts. That would be one thing that, in one of the cities I worked for before as an arts coordinator, the tourism out of the chamber, the tourism people came together. So it was every arts organization and everybody who had a venue for, you know, hotels and restaurants all had a seat at the table, and they tried to create their own commons. So I don't know if in some instances working with the chamber has this leadership component to it, although the chamber member organization, so possibly that doesn't match up to a general overall plan, but I have seen that work well with chambers and tourism boards.
Okay.
And there's not I don't think, I'm just sitting here racking my brain, but a downtown exhibition space is there. It's not a co-op or something, but it's more like a, you know, Sun Valley has one and Moscow has one, and it's like a place in downtown where rotating exhibits would occur. White walls, you know, and nice exhibitions. Is there one?
When I was working for POAC, and we moved our office, that was our number one goal, was to
Okay.
find a space where we could have a large exhibit area. And it was impossible to find a space that we could afford to rent in. There was just no one willing to let go of such valuable real estate downtown. And there was no guarantee that we would ever make enough money off of art sales to be able to pay $2,000 a month in rent for such a space. I think there are spaces that could be used for that purpose. It's just a matter of whether it's feasible financially.
Yeah, and I'm thinking of the one in Moscow. I think it's called the Pritchard Gallery. And the thing about it too is like, it has exhibitions of maybe a college student. It's not necessarily stuff for sale. It's more like this experience that people have with art that's beyond just the, it's that
It's like a museum almost.
kind of,
They have visiting artists.
You might see something kind of edgy there
Yeah.
or some, you know, because where can somebody see that here?
There isn't.
Yeah.
Co-op does a nice job of displaying art in public, in businesses, but it's an agreement with the business. It's not a specific place, except for, what about the one where the old Columbia Bank? Is that more?
That was
That's kind of
a fantastic exhibit space, but when the building was purchased, the owners said that they did not want to
Okay.
have anything on the walls anymore.
It's for sale again.
Wow.
So,
I think
it
we're
costs
going
like
back,
$20 million.
I don't have that, sorry.
Space again.
If I win the lottery, mine. One of the things I'd like to go back when we were talking about all the different organizations is a cultural trust. Where it's one place where you can find everything. There's a lot of cities that have it. Pittsburgh has it, and I think Portland has it. But they're all, when you go and find out every information and anything going on, it's a cultural trust of all the arts in the city and places to have art, take classes, whatever. So that's something that Sandpoint Cultural Trust.
Again, to me, that's that sort of organizing component, that
Mhm.
leadership that heads up advocacy and coordination. And we can say collaboration, but we're also talking about coordinating efforts and information and marketing. So I don't hog the entire hour. I'm going to pass it over to Nick to see if you have any specific questions for this group.
Not at the moment. I think one question I want to ask, is there a feeling or some consideration about, when we're talking about the arts, any consideration about how do we spur creative businesses, creative industries here in the community? And more than just art galleries, but are there other types of creative activity that could happen, you know, or is happening and nobody really speaks of it? Things like, I mean, we've heard about, there's filmmakers here in town. You know, or are there architects, are there writers in town?
Yes.
Yes.
There was a maker space.
Oh. we should
But,
ask about that.
It's no longer, right?
Well, makers-
But it was really cool.
what
And
happened
it
to
worked with the schools, it worked, and people could, you know, come and do laser cut stuff there, and it had all the equipment, and it was very awesome for our community.
It was privately owned initially and pretty successful, and then the owners sold it, or they decided to move on, and it became a nonprofit, and I think they just struggled getting it set up as an organization.
It was successful for the, you know, community at large. Financially, I don't know that it necessarily ever was.
Supporting itself.
And those are really hard, you know,
Yeah.
as, you know, we've done some research around various areas in the state and beyond. And it's hard to make those kind of spaces work as a for-profit. And they usually take partnerships with, and we brought in NIC to see if they would be willing to take it on. And a couple of problems, there's a lot of fire safety issues for them. They need a really robust fire in that particular building. They looked around as a first thing they saw, they were like, we can't have students come, you know, come in here. And the other issue with NIC is that we're not in their taxing district, right? So it's hard for them to justify investing in facilities specifically. Their presence here came with a lot of local funding and from Urban Renewal Agency and local citizens and foundations, even get them the small presence that they currently have. So that's, unfortunately, we don't have a university or a school to really, to any real significant degree, help us.
That does seem easier in towns that have some type of, you know,
Right.
university or
Right.
at least 2-year. We had a couple of galleries too that opened that had spaces, but they didn't survive very long that I've seen since I've been here. The Filmmakers Network that you mentioned, if it's the same one that I have at the Canada, it's because I've made sure it happens at an extremely discounted price. It's not been feasible, you know, money-wise, but it's grown over time. And then the thing we have coming up this month is one-act plays written locally, performed by actors locally. And this is something at the Canada this month, obviously. First time is not going to be as good as we had kind of hoped, but so we've tried to make those spaces, and we have a Playhouse group that allows for new directors and new scripts and several of those things. So we culture that side of it. But
So sorry, it's going towards the end of the day, I'm losing my words. Nurturing the emerging
yes,
artists.
nurturing the emerging and the existing,
Okay.
because there are people who move here with extreme talent that don't really have a creative outlet for some of that. I've had some major Hollywood people actually come in through the Canada and do certain things because they missed that level.
Are there any local or regional venture funds out there that people could tap into for capital?
Venture funds?
Yeah, something like that, or some fund out there that could seed creative business.
There is, the Innovation Collective does have a mountain.
What's that? I'm sorry.
There's a Innovation Collective, it's called Coeur d'Alene. They started in Coeur d'Alene, and they've been going to other rural communities in Idaho and other areas. Kind of a unique model that they do have a venture fund for specific to rural, specifically a venture capital fund for innovative types of, you know, products or, you know, et cetera. There are local foundations that have been supportive of the arts as well. And there's, you know, regional foundations as well, like the Innova Foundation, Idaho Community Foundation.
Most of them won't fund individual work though. Right.
Yeah, the Idaho
Yeah, I
Commission of
guess-
Arts is the only one for
I guess, you know,
individual.
and you have to forgive me, I get narrowly focused on public art because that's pretty much what the commission and it's what I've been tasked with doing. The broader, you know, and that's part of this effort, I think, is to, you know, what is the city's role or, you know, what is the solution to bring all the other nonprofit arts together?
In the performing arts, in the live theater side of it, we've tried to find funding to help people put on plays because we still have to cover our expenses at the Canada, but we're trying to help the theater community here and finding ways, and that's been a big challenge, is trying to find it because we can't find, because theater groups are typically ours is in-house, but the other ones are not nonprofits. They are just organizations, so it's hard to find them funding.
Patricia's the executive director of Canada Theater.
I figured.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I thought you guys were coming there tomorrow night, so I didn't do the tour yesterday.
I
so
hear we might
apologize.
be.
Oh, good, because
Yeah.
I'll let you, I'll meet you there and let you in anytime you want to see, so.
So what I'm hearing again is funding is project by project. It's
Yeah.
catch as catch can. So
It is.
maybe this plan or the strategy committee, looking at funding of strategies as opposed to projects, and then maybe initiatives for this development.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Because we do have individual writing groups. I'm just aware of a few of them, but we do have a pretty prolific writing community. And stories, poetry, books, scripts, I've seen the gamut here. So that's one thing we're not typically focused on, like say Aaron, because that's not in my wheelhouse, but there is a pretty big group of writers up here as well. So I don't know where their resources are and where they would have a part in this discussion.
And we just heard from someone who, what was her name?
Christine?
Yes, Old Holbert? Yeah.
Oh, yes,
She might-
Lost Coast Press.
Yes, and she might be someone for you guys to reach out to at some point. But
Tell me the name again?
Christina Holbert, I can forward you her contact, that'd be great. But, yeah, she was interested in doing kind of a literary public art kind of display.
Yes.
Cool.
Yes.
She has her publishing company, but also the Sandpoint Literary Collective.
Ah, that's the one I was trying to remember. I knew there was one other organization I was.
Going back to, and again, this is back to my focus of like, how do we spend the remaining dollars this year, or what's beyond that? How do we do it in a way that maximizes, the public benefit and, maximizes the investment, what projects, where, what types? And I guess I want to know, is this part of what this plan is going to identify for the Arts Commission specifically? And I know I'm kind of narrowing down, because that's what, in regards to public funds, we want to maximize what we do with those funds, right? While we have them, and also ask what's beyond, Sarah, like you pointed out right off the bat, really. And so that's my question, is that, will that ultimately, do you see that being reflected in this plan, or is that just going to be a recommendation for something after the plan?
I don't know the answer to that right now, but I do know that you just added to the priorities. So the one of the priorities is to guide how the Arts Commission can maximize the public benefit of the investment it's making now. Is that, did I hear you correctly?
Absolutely.
Okay. So I would say yes, if it's a priority for the commission, then that's something that we'll have to address in the goals of the plan. Is that fair to say, Nick? I don't want to speak for you.
Absolutely. What is your, in a lot of communities, the public library offers arts programming, and some of them have maker spaces. What about your public library? None of you like?
Meeting spaces.
I just, we did have another, it was a place where people could take after-school art classes and adults could take pottery, and we had that going for several years with the Arts Alliance, and it went under. And since then, has something comparable to that replaced it as far as a place for people to do art? A community. Creations, okay. Never mind, Creations does a good job.
Is it
with
still the Arts Alliance?
Yeah,
That's
it's, okay.
Also,
They have museum nonprofit sites. Which is
Creations
nice.
does a great job with that,
Yeah,
especially for the kids.
it's a specific design that you probably know better than me, but they have a nonprofit, but
It's the one in the Bridge Building?
yeah, museum status, right? Is that?
Right, because of the store.
It might be a 501c4 or,
Yes. Okay. But they also have the art space as the old Arts Alliance 501c3s.
Okay.
They just are doing business as creations,
Oh.
but they still have
Okay.
Arts Alliance.
Oh, okay.
That's good.
So they have a 3 and a 4?
The museum, the store is a museum space, they have that, and then they have the Arts Alliance for the art space.
For the arts. Okay.
Yeah, it was important to us when we couldn't make the Arts Alliance financially feasible, that we passed it on to someone that could carry on the mission.
That's fantastic. I didn't really get that piece of the puzzle.
And then the music conservatory partnering with POAC has, maybe you were in the start of this discussion because of, and I keep pointing to Tammy was with that. When they remodel the music conservatory, they do plan to have a gallery space, correct?
Yes.
Yeah. So there will be a common, at least display area, not.
That's a very fortunate thing that they just secured that building, and so that might, I don't know, if that potentially is an answer to part of the solution of having gallery space, if they're incorporating that, go into the music conservatory building downtown.
Part of their priority, right? I think, yeah. I think so.
so does that vision for an arts center in that renovated building, does it feel to you like that like is a magnet, is that a hub? Would be that the anchor for?
For the visual, and then they're also nurturing artists, but they'll still need performance spaces like Heartwood and the Canada to perform. There will not be a huge performing area, right?
Yeah, that building is too small to have a full umbrella in it. It's great and wonderful what they're doing, but it's limited as a space scalability wise. That's why also that thing, I mean, it's whatever, but the event center is still for sale.
No, really.
And several people mentioned in various meetings that, and I'm familiar with one or two, where old school buildings like that kind have been made into art centers where organizations have offices, sometimes performing or gallery space, and sometimes you can rent out some of the smaller spaces to artists or photographers or whatever creative people that the building allows for.
That would be amazing.
Torpedo Factory, Washington DC. That's
Do what?
they have. It's called the Torpedo Factory. It's an old torpedo factory,
Yep.
and that's what it is. It is just for the arts, and they have art walks in it, and there's gallery spaces. There's actually a store for the artists that may not be working that day, but you can go right into their studios.
Concord, Massachusetts was the other one I was particularly thinking of that used a similar kind of building, probably smaller than the Torpedo Museum, but still probably about the size of the event center.
The Torpedo Factory is city-owned, and the rent is subsidized to the
Yeah,
working artists,
Just
and
wondering that.
they have to spend a certain number of hours interacting with the public with open studios. And
Which seems to make funding stabilized. I know in Meridian, arts fall under Parks and Rec. And that's how they've stabilized it. Nampa does a little different, has its own designation, but does seem to stabilize
Stabilization
funding.
is a word I'm, fun.
Especially
I'd like to know more about the event center that's for sale that people keep mentioning.
So there's two, I think, that were mentioned.
Okay.
The first one is the POAC use of display. That is the Columbia Bank Building downtown, which has a variety. It's a bank. There's some great event spaces in there, an auditorium, and there's a community space below, a fountain, a restaurant, and a lot of offices. It's I think 4 stories. The biggest building really in downtown. So that's for sale, but I think what we were just talking about is confusing because there's the Sandpoint Center and the Sandpoint Event Center, formerly known as, which is the old high school. There's a different historic building. Not a new.
Euclid and Pine.
Yes, Euclid and Pine Street. It's right next to the city park, the T-ball court, and also our community garden. And
in the festival office.
And the festival Sandpoint office, that's right. That's actually a separately owned building, but same
I went to school there.
general Did you? Okay, yeah, this is the former high school, right?
I went to 9th grade there.
9th grade center.
Yeah.
And those are called-
Oh, those guys did.
And it got the Orchid Award not too many years ago either.
So it used to be there used to be a lot more events there, and they kind of remodeled part of it, but they retained on the second or third floor, there's a really beautiful event space, auditorium. And that building has been for sale for a while.
And we had a prom in the bottom floor one year,
Did you?
where
Yeah.
the old wooden floor is.
I think the gym has been split up.
It's gone now?
Yes.
Yeah,
Is it on the road?
and the kitchen's gone too, just taken out.
I don't think so.
And NIC classes, I don't know, if NIC classes still on there. It's
Who
a
owns
great
this
space.
Property.
Brad Scott?
It's an individual owns and it's a historic structure?
I was just gonna check that.
I know my
I
dad
wanna
went
say
to
it
high
is,
school
but
there.
I wanna double check.
It's probably a little more affordable than the Columbia Bank building.
It was 3 million, I think about a year ago. I don't know if they've dropped it again.
So is either one of these what people refer to as the event center is for sale?
It could be either one,
Okay.
frankly.
I was specifically referring to the one that's called the event center, the second one he was talking about.
Okay.
Yeah.
But they're both, I mean, they both have great potential.
What about the granary, this potential site for exhibition space or Art Center, Heritage Museum space, so is that?
The museum did a feasibility, oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
The museum did a feasibility study about moving into that space, and because it would require such huge renovations for accessibility as well as just usability, I think they put the figure at about $7 million, and just to do a capital campaign of that size was bigger than they thought was realistic for our community.
Yeah, if you don't mind, it might be that there might be better options.
You know that you could probably sell the tax credits for that property, gain some equity. It's listed in the National Register of Historic Places, which makes it eligible for historic tax credits.
I think part of the idea was that the owner of the building would lease the property to the museum for free, but he would retain the ownership of that. I don't know if that affects.
And I think it was recently designated as a historic district. I think, I want to say for that purpose, in order, to have those tax credits to help make that museum possible at that location. I think it's the development of the building that is the high price tag. And I don't know what the board, the Historic Association board has decided, but, it's possible, maybe that could come up again. And, maybe through the right partnerships. It would certainly add a lot of vibrancy downtown. Right now, the museum, as you know, is hidden away. Yeah.
There are, tax structures you could put in place to take advantage of the tax credits. Something we could explore.
The other thing,
Go
I'm
ahead.
sorry,
Go ahead.
the other thing that factors in, sorry, coming back to money, but the Canada, the Music Conservatory, POAC, they all have to hold events and have to have their, they have to get supplementary funding from the community. So it's a lot of people reaching out to the community all the time, just to keep their things going. So there isn't, none of them are like stable with optional outside funding as well, so.
One thing I would, I'm curious about is with so many organizations in town that are focused on, that are event and project based, how do we hold space and energy for asking bigger questions about things like accessibility?
Yeah.
Effectiveness of what we're doing. Like, how do we put the time into evaluating and really deeply considering, basically doing the work that you've been asked to do here, evaluating what our community needs on an ongoing basis? Because I think that the project that you've been hired to do is really critical for our community, but I want to make sure that we have the resources and the knowledge to keep asking those questions and making sure that we're continuing to do the good work for the next 20 years and that we don't just falter after you.
So the way that could be addressed perhaps is within the plan, putting in within a goal statement, a strategy of annual evaluation with the community. You ask the community how we're doing. Because part of this process is going to be asking the community what the community wants, and bumping that up against, supply and demand.
Right.
And then with everybody project focused and holding space for bigger questions while you're in triage is really difficult, and the pandemic doesn't make it any easier. So I think it has to be built into the fabric of the plan, is that we check in with the community on a regular basis. Is that sound reasonable? Okay. 3 minutes, 3-minute warning.
Do any of the rest of the commissioners have ideas, Holly, you probably will, about how do we reach the age groups that aren't likely to come forward and offer input for this plan? I'm thinking particularly artists who, we have excellent education programs in the arts here. But I think we have a lot of young people in that like 18 to 25, 30-year range who want to be artists. They want to live in this community, but it's not financially feasible. And that was something I struggled with when I worked at the Arts Council, was it was really hard to find them, to ask them what we could do to serve them better. Do any of you have suggestions for how to better include their voices in this project?
Well, maybe consider something we did a while ago at the Canada. In that case, we put a high school student on the board, on committees and every meeting, and he was actually the first social media person. But what about targeting for the Arts Commission, a person from 18 or even 16 or something to 25 to be a regular part of the commission? Just a thought.
And we have had a high school liaison before, and hopefully, Holly can help us out.
Yeah, hopefully I'll see some of my students
I
one of
know.
these
So
days.
hard.
But maybe
Youth representation on the
Yeah.
commissions.
maybe like 16 to 24 or something, or 18, not necessarily high school, but similar idea based on what Hannah was talking about.
Well, even for this plan, I think we need to really try and get it out there to the younger people, and hopefully, we can help them. We have planned on having a liaison in high school or the charter schools.
Yeah, I mean, our community engagement can only go so far because we're not here. But we're gonna leave we're gonna leave the city with all of our surveys, all of our swag. We created coasters, and we're gonna ask that people go to the breweries and
Okay.
restaurants, meet with the owners and see if we can get the coasters are really cool. They have images of the public art, in the city. Start a conversation with the business owner about the benefits of, that cultural plan on economic vitality, and see if we can engage them in getting the word out. So people will go to the website, fill out a survey, whatever. Maybe
You hit the right spot on the breweries, I would say.
the coasters are really cool. I wish I had them with me, Suraj has them.
They're at the farmer's
Well, you know,
market.
it's funny that you mentioned that. I think they're going now, but when I first came here a couple years after, coasters that were amazing were from the library, and they were in all the bars, and there weren't many brew pubs then, but it was amazing. And what a great thing. Instead of a Bud coaster, it was for the library. And I thought that was really brilliant. And this is a similar great idea.
Yeah, so it's gonna take, marketing of the plan, and we put some of the infrastructure in place, but it's gonna take probably each and every one of you on both of the commissions, and everyone on the steering committee to help get the word out to people.
I've already plugged it on my social media. So,
Awesome. So that's it. I think we have to wrap because they have a meeting starting at 5.
Aha.
All right.
Thank
I
you.
will. So thank you very much. We
job.
look forward to hearing the results and working with you going forward. So
We're happy to be here.
All right, and meeting adjourned.